Welcome to the XY Advisor Podcast, a global community of financial advisors sharing and learning with one another to drive the positive evolution of financial advice. To get involved, go to xyadvisor.com or simply download the XY Advisor app.
Optimo Pathfinder is the next generation of financial modelling. Designed specifically for Australian financial advisors, Pathfinder allows you to develop and compare multiple financial strategies within minutes. With cutting-edge optimisation and built-in legislation, it removes the burden of time-consuming modelling and report creation. Easy to use and easy to understand. It saves hours of manual work and allows you to turn around financial strategies in a fraction of the time. Take your business to the next level with Optimo Pathfinder.
Hello and welcome to this topic series on delivering advice differently. My name is Fraser Jack, and in this episode number 4 of our 5-part series, we cover demonstration of understanding and how it can empower clients. Now, this is a huge topic, from your professional obligations to get informed consent to helping the non-CFO in client couples. If you want to do more than just what's compliant when it comes to your demonstration of understanding, then this episode is a must. Thank you for joining me again, Ben.
It is fantastic to be back with you again, Fraser.
Well, fantastic to have you along. Now, we are talking about demonstration of understanding and empowerment within the advice process. And obviously, a very big part of the advice process is the client putting things in place and understanding the process. Obviously, there's some legal parts behind that.
Yeah, so we talked in some of the earlier episodes about all the laws in the Corporations Act and everything that the regulator requires us to do to comply with those laws. But the important thing ultimately is that the client understands the advice and the client implements the advice and the client sticks with their financial plan.
Yep. Now talk to us about the about this process, because it's been something that has been a bit of a hot topic recently on informed consent and how do you demonstrate and how do you provide information. Everybody, I feel like everybody went to a written documentation and file notes and more words. What are your thoughts?
So off the back of the FCA Code of Ethics, which had one of the standards, and we can't use the term FCA anymore because FCA doesn't exist. So it's the Financial Planner and Advisor's Code of Ethics. One of the important concepts in that was ensuring that the client understands the advice that you're providing to them and consents to implementing the advice you provide to them. Understanding and consent don't come. Well, there's a view that understanding and consent comes from clients signing a piece of paper to say that they understand and consent. But the reality is, all of us know we have clients who come back later and say, "Oh, I didn't actually understand that." And in worst case scenarios, clients come back and make a complaint, and that complaint can be sometimes easily dealt with, or that complaint can sometimes go through external dispute resolution processes and worst case scenario court cases. And so anything that you can do to ensure that clients really understand the advice you provide both today and, more importantly, potentially in the future, and provide ongoing consent because they understand the advice, is going to be a benefit to you as a professional and a benefit to you if the client does come back at some point and does make a complaint about the advice that you've provided them.
Yeah, it seems to be to me, it's an old world way of doing it. You provide a long documentation full of disclosure that says put a wet signature on the end of here to prove that you understood. And the longer the document, the more proof that you really can't understand everything in it. But tell us about the other way. What's the other way of doing that when it comes to informed consent? Obviously, the next thing that people talk about is file notes, but obviously, I sort of think that's only a stepping stone.
Yeah, I think this providing long documents and requiring a wet signature on the end of it is really a lawyer's concept of how do you provide information and make sure the client has agreed to it. You give them hundreds of pages of words and then you ask them for a a signature on it. I mean, what you're ultimately trying to get to is the point where the client understands themselves and understand their goals and objectives, understands the financial plan you're putting in place to achieve them, and then is going out and explaining it to their family and friends at a barbecue. This is my financial plan, and this is what I'm doing, and this is going to is how it's going to help me achieve my goals and objectives. And anything you can do to reduce the information asymmetry between the plan that you have recommended for the client and their understanding and ability to explain that at a barbecue to their family and their friends is a benefit to you. And so, to your point, one way to do it is to record file notes and provide those file notes back to the client. You can go a lot further by actually providing the advice in a format that the client can more easily understand and digest and replay if they need a reminder themselves of what the plan is.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, we mentioned before the barbecue test, or what's commonly known as the pub test, and what would consumers actually say about this? I really like the idea, obviously, of asking the consumer, what their how would they describe that back to their friends at a barbecue, and then being able to let the planner to be able to have that conversation, but recording that in their own words.
And I think that's a massively missed opportunity. Many planners will do it. So again, you'll go through the process of explaining the strategies and recommendations you're making, and you might whiteboard it, and you might draw it on a piece of paper, or you might describe it, and you might actually ask the client to say it back to you to make sure they understand, particularly in this post code of ethics world we now operate in. But rarely do we actually let the client make the statement of the advice you're providing to them back to themselves, so that they can go, this is my advice, this is my financial plan, this is what I am agreeing to do in relation to how I spend money and how I save money and how I protect myself if something goes wrong. Explain it back in their own words that they can watch back themselves and even share with others if they want to talk about it at the pub or at barbecues.
Yep. Now, I want to go a little bit deeper just into this exact point, because obviously recording a conversation on video, I mean, we're recording a conversation right now. We're recording the voice, but there's nuances in voice, and when you record the video as well, there's nuances in the video. Confused looks or shaking of heads, pauses, awkward pauses of non-understanding, all these sort of things include the non-verbal cues are so important when it comes to recording their demonstration of understanding that aren't recorded in file notes or written texts.
Yeah, that's right. We were having this conversation earlier, weren't we, Fraser? I was using air quotes, which won't come through in the podcast, unfortunately. But I think that point is critically important, and particularly when you think about sometimes you've got one client, but sometimes you've got two clients, and you're going to have the client that is the one who understands finances better or has more control over the finances in the relationship. But often where the problems occur is with that to use a common term, the non-CFO spouse. Or non-CFO partner, the one who doesn't necessarily have as much control. And it's beneficial to have a recording and see their reaction and see their understanding and see them gaining that understanding over the process of the advice being provided, and allowing them to see that they understood. Often they might understand in the room, but because it's not what they're dealing with day in and day out, they'll forget very quickly. So you want to be able to show them, actually, no, you understood this. You get this. You can do it.
Yeah, you mentioned that in one of the previous episodes around the fourth dimension throughout time, and you're absolutely right. For somebody to understand at the time is one thing. For somebody to remember it, 6 years time when there's a complaint or there's something like that, people say, "Oh no, I didn't understand." But to have, a file note, sort of a one thing, but to have them have a copy of their video, I guess that probably heads it off the past of them demonstrating that they understood at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And this happens to me every year. So I have a financial planner and I have a financial plan. And every year when our insurance premium bills come to my house and I show them to my wife, she goes, "Why on earth are we paying this much money for insurance? We don't need insurance. It's jinxing us. By paying this, we're actually going to invite the problem happening." And that's not the conversation we had at the time. The conversation we had at the time with my financial planner, our financial planner was, if something happened to us, what do we want in place to help look after the kids? What state do we want to leave our finances in terms of the house and in terms of helping our parents and brothers and sisters look after our family if that happens? And, if I probe her, she remembers those conversations, but it takes a lot of time and effort to get her back into that headspace. And so, as I said, this concept of living in the fourth dimension, which recording a video and playing that video back to her would have allowed us to go back and go, "No, you remember this conversation. You remember saying these things," and it would be a much quicker and easier process for me. But right now, what I have to do is we have the conversation. I have to go to the other end of the house. I have to go to the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. I have to go all the way to the very back of the filing cabinet. I have to pull out that 150, I think mine's 150-page statement of advice, when none of the figures and none of the information really reflects our life today, and say this is why we are paying these insurance premiums. It just takes a lot of time and effort that if I could just show her a video, it would be so much easier.
Yeah, and it's absolutely a really good point when it comes to demonstration of understanding and empowerment, that if working with a couple, then, the person who's probably wants to take the least interest in the actual conversation at the time, is across everything, and you can make sure that they completely understand what's happening.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the number of holidays that she could have gone on that I've ruined her life because we've paid these insurance premiums, just, it's ruining my life having to have these conversations. So I wish my financial planner had provided us with a video.
With a video.
Adam, if you're listening.
Ben, thanks so much for coming on and chatting to us in this particular episode. We look forward to catching you in the last episode when we talk about client-centric advice process.
I can't wait, Fraser. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'll speak to you next time.
Welcome back to this episode 4 of our 5-part series, where we're talking around the concept of, demonstration of understanding. We sort of covered off on using visuals, and in the previous episode, we really talked about engagement. But this one, we want to go a little bit deeper, and we want to sort of talking about the concept of the clients. Understanding, you being able to demonstrate that they understand, and then being able to have these conversations outside, I guess, of the conversation that they have with you. Prashant, this is obviously something that's been on advisors' minds a lot recently with regards to some of the legislative requirements. And how do you think most people are tackling it?
Most people, in terms of understanding their advice and making sure the client understands it. I think a lot of traditionally, there was a lot of emphasis on going through the SOA and showing them everything in that sort of one piece of document. But again, everyone knows that's a compliance requirement. But people have tried to make that as best as possible, pretty looking. Some have tried to put more pictures and colors in there and all of that. But what we're finding is, like when you basically call that client 1 week later in the old model, we find they don't remember what was done. They remember it 1 hour after or 2 days after, but then 1 to 2 weeks after they go, what are we doing again? There's that because it is too much information given to anyone. I think if we swap roles and if we had, let's say, how many of us have built our own houses? Like if you remember the time that you've gone into that color selection process where the builder goes, oh, here's this, here's that. You come out of that exhausted. And three weeks later, you don't know what color paint you picked for your house, because you're like, it's just a lot of information. You understood it at that moment, but you forget it because it's just overloading. So I think everyone's doing a very good job trying the best to work with the limitations they've got, but I think we found that delivering over time makes it more palatable and agreeable and understandable. Even with that, sometimes people still go, "What are we doing with the insurance thing again?" It still happens, but it's not entirely avoided. But it's actually, we're finding it a lot better than the old way.
Yeah, it's a really good point you raise around the concept of understanding in the moment versus forgetting about that, or being able to recall the exact outcomes from that. I guess that happens to a lot of people, in a really good analogy with the paint choices. But it's certainly something that, I guess from a business point of view, Michelle, we need to be able to then demonstrate that understanding or that proof point, or these were the things we talked about, or the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Prashant's right. There is so much complexity and choice in all of this, and you come out of the paint shop experience going, what colour was it? Was it the burnt honey or the sunshine yellow? It is complex. And I think, the key is cutting through that complexity, reducing it down to the simple, what are the key strategies and the key things that we're doing. And, we've talked about this before, but backing it up with visuals that are clear and simple, and, assumptions that are transparent, and those sort of clear, plain English things that they can take away. Wherever you can back that up with visuals and things that cut through the complexity, I think is really important. And some of that's got to be moving away from the complexity of big onerous statement of advice documents that are impenetrable, written in a legal jargon. And I think there are exciting opportunities as to how we can do that differently.
Yeah, now, Prashant, I know that I actually like some of the stuff that you're doing with regards to scoping down these conversations to one specific thing. This particular piece of advice is around this one thing, and we do this, and then allowing people to come on a journey that takes 6 to 12 months before everything's sort of set up, and they move into the next phase. Tell us about how that's gone from the idea of your clients being able to understand what they're doing, working on in one particular time and place, versus that whole concept of trying to do 1,000 things at once.
Mm-hmm. I think the experience is much better. The financial literacy, which which is one of those things we try to measure, is getting better because they understand one thing really well. Like things like volatility ranges, and so when, let's say, the November to now, the market sort of tanked a little bit, we had more people calling. We had 0 phone calls saying, what's going on? Versus we had more people saying, should we start investing now? Remember we were going to do it? Should we start it now? So it was different because they start to understand a little bit more. The panic is out because everyone, the fear of the unknown is, I guess, the greatest threat to behavioral change. And I think when you sort of do it one thing at a time, you take away the unknown as much as possible. So that's really resulting in clients' confidence, their understanding of it. Technically, at the end of the first year, they kind of know enough to sort of self-manage themselves, their strategy a little bit, but they choose not to. They basically resubscribe. So our resubscription rate's about 80 to 90%, because, So
just on that, you have a 12-month subscription, and then you ask for a resubscription?
That's correct. So it's almost like, this is what we're working on, start of the year, end of the year, according to the financial modeling and everything we discussed. These are the targets for the end of the year. We've hit it, or we've missed it by an inch, or missed it by a mile. Let's work on it, because what these things don't do is it doesn't show you the bumpiness of the journey. 20 years on, it's a smooth line that way, but it is not going to be as smooth as it looks. So we're helping you with the bumps, we're helping you with everything like that. So there's a clearly defined target to achieve for the year after, because through that modeling, we've got those parameters that define those things, so there's something to look forward to, rather than saying, would you like us to manage your super for next year? You know what I mean? It means nothing to them, to be honest. It's more about, here are the thresholds. Let's keep observing. Let's keep changing if we need to. And it just goes on for the next year on.
Prashant, how much of your client process is around the idea of education, when you're talking about bringing your upskilling them, or allowing them to grow grow their financial literacy along the way?
I think education plays a very big part, but we don't sort of call it as an education piece. Going back, when we talk assumptions going into something, that's education. You know what I mean? There's so many things we do that we can because no one wants to get educated, you know what I mean? They want to learn, they want to know it, and somehow they want to find it themselves, you know what I mean? And it's about just laying everything in that sort of like a video game format to sort of say, here's the assumptions, you show them something, and you make them question it, and then you teach them, and then you sort of tell them. And so that's how we do it. So if it's financial modeling, to say, let's say we're starting an investment program, okay, and then we're starting, say, an education bond for their child as a result of this. And when we talk about it, we say this is how it's going. Everything about why we say this, and when we present it to them, they usually ask the questions, and the more we allow them to ask questions, that's how we respond to those answers. So just allowing them to ask questions in that advice phase, in that discovery phase, I think is where we insert the education elements.
Yeah, as you're saying that, it's kind of like you're telling them or asking them to slow down the process. You like to say, well, we could dump all this information on you, but bringing you along on the journey and allowing you to understand and empowering you along the way is a much better process.
Much better, definitely.
I guess, Michelle, you could say that for any business too, for any relationship-based business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love Prashant's approach in this of, really utilising that subscription model to bake in the education along the way. And, it's that idea of taking people on the journey.
Not just, obviously not just from a client-centric set of circumstances, but obviously now this is more of a compliance issue as well, that people are sort of trying to work out how do we demonstrate that the client, came along the journey and understood and wanted to do that at that time. What are your thoughts around that, the idea of, recording that information that your clients understand? How do you go about that? File notes and understanding, as you mentioned before, you use your WhatsApp groups. How do you demonstrate that, or able to demonstrate that to somebody that comes and says, can you prove to me that your clients understood?
I'd say the way we track it is I guess, unintentionally, it's around how many questions they keep asking. The more questions that they ask, we think that they understand it, or they're getting better at it. I think silence is the opposite of understanding. So it's more, this is where we go, this is what we're doing, ask me any questions. When you sort of pause on that, either the advice meeting or the discovery phases, or risk profile meeting, however you everyone has their own business thing, pause and ask them to ask more questions, and I think that's the critical point.
And you can also tell by the quality of the questions they're asking. If they're asking more and more intelligent questions along the way that show that they've understood, I mean, that's a really good indicator.
Absolutely, and I love the concept of asking quality questions at them too, like asking the questions of, how would you tell your friend at a barbecue about this particular thing, and allowing them the time and space to be able to demonstrate to you that they understand without saying to them, do you understand? Yep, no, silence is, like you mentioned before. What are your thoughts around asking those sorts of questions?
So you mean asking questions about, do you understand?
No, asking questions about that would allow them to then demonstrate. So ask, tell us how you would describe this to a friend at a barbecue.
I reckon that'll be amazing. I've never thought about that, to be honest, but I think that'll be nice. I think they do. I think you'd also find that your referral rates will also be a good indication of that too. Is that the people are talking about what you do and how you do it, and they're probably reciprocating and spilling it out in the other way. I think that's another good indicator too, I think.
Yep. Now, Prashant, one of the things that you mentioned previously was the concept of, you and your business partner being able to say to your wives that this is what we're doing, and allowing them to have those conversations using visuals. But, how do you then, so let's say you've got two people in the office and one person clearly understands and the other person's silent.
I think, I normally focus the conversation more on the silent one than the driver's seat person. Of course, the driver's seat person usually has most of the answers, so to speak, or they understand it. Then they usually, but the silent one is where the presentation is channelized towards, and the pace is all defined by this, that slowest person. I think it's more of that delivery, and we intentionally ping them when we do WhatsApp messages. We intentionally ping them and say, hey, and, trying to get them engaged and even try to even get them some homework to do kind of thing, little things, can you find this out for me, please? Just getting them to sort of get a little bit more outside their comfort zone if we can. Little things we do like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one of the other things that we haven't really talked about that you're doing is a lot around short videos or just explanations around things if you think there might be more information needed or required.
That's right. I think we're finding sending them short pre-recorded videos of things helps the slowest person understand better. You're finding that they watch it, they can pause it, they can rewind it until the point they can go back and forth. So we've actually started doing more of that pre-recorded video, send it to them on the WhatsApp platform, that sort of thing. So we're finding that really enhancing that thing. And most of those tools these days have a function that actually says how long they watched and things like that. That's your other thing, a measure that you can point to with understanding. And to an extent, some of these tools actually say who watched it even, depending on the email address that they log in from and little things like that. So, yeah.
And Prashant, is that something you tend to do around a particular topic or stage in the process? Like, is it more strategy you'll use the videos for, or just answering basic questions? Like, when do you use those videos?
Anything that requires an explanation for more than 2 to 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. Anything. It reduces the need for a meeting. It reduces the need to coordinate the time coordinating between you, the client, and availability, and and all of that. So anything that's going to take us more than 5 minutes to explain goes in a video.
And what's the sort of feedback you get from customers on that? Do they like it?
They love it. It's just you could find the person not in the driver's seat being most engaged at the back of those things, and it's not like they're feeling ignored anymore. You know what I mean? Like they're not. No one wants to feel like that, and I don't think anyone wants to make them feel like that. But I think they definitely feel a bit more empowered and a part of it.
Yeah, and having empowered clients is pretty important. I think it's sort of. To do that, it's around really getting that emotional connection as to why we're doing these things, and having that deep, that why they're doing them. Do you always sort of finish with that in the conversation? You go back to the why?
If there's a lack of direction, usually, I think they know the why during the first month and so. But what will happen is after about 3 to 4 months into the journey, they sometimes forget it. The noise takes over, the typical barbecue conversation of I bought this property and I'm doing that. And people come back and say, why don't I do that? And we go, why do you want that? You're perfectly fine with just the way you are, those times I think, there's a little bit of why that keeps coming back to the thing. But I think we definitely incorporate the why towards the end of the journey of the year, just to keep reiterating why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And just on the final piece of this puzzle, I guess, gaining and gathering that informed consent and keeping it on file. Do you have a process around that, or is that just something that it depends on each client? How do you sort of record that informed consent?
Well, on a meeting point of view, it's file notes. But with our communication methodology, there is not many meetings now. There's high touch points and high level of clarity that's already been logged through the videos we send, through the messaging that happens in this thing. Every single thing is informed consent. When they say, I want to do this, what's my BSB account number? I need to make this contribution. What's the BPay detail? When they sort of go back and forth on between admin and myself and everything, that's all informed consent right there, because we are the other thing is, I think another way we unintendedly we manage this is we are a do it with you model. We're not a do it for you model, right? So when you do it with them, they are a part of that co-creation, right? So if they don't understand it, they'd never do it or be in a position to do it. So I think to us, it was all just lining up one after the other.
Yeah, so to me, what you're saying is it's a whole lot of small incremental steps rather than just one giant leap.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And Michelle, from a business point of view, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Fraser, I'm interested to hear, how do you hear other advisors do this to get the informed consent in really effective ways?
Yeah, it's been a bugbear for a lot of people trying to work through the possibilities, and I think the technology enabling us to get these conversations back, like Prashant's using the WhatsApp, and there's plenty of messaging ways that they can happen rather than the old paper signature way, but just being able to understand, getting clients to demonstrate that understanding. As I said, by asking good quality questions, whether it's in a video or recorded conversation, or even, the Zoom or Teams meeting type conversation that people have with their clients, and being able to record that conversation so that it took place.
It also seems that the video SOA is a good way that people are taking it, because you can record that meeting of the advice being given, and you can use, really clear visuals and graphs and plain English cut through the complexity, but you've also got the meeting that shows their understanding through the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And recording of Zoom meetings, I think, is a big, or Teams meetings or whatever it might be, is a big part of your file notes, keeping the notes of the conversation on file by just having the recordings and making them available to the client to watch as well. Do you record your meetings, Prashant?
Yes. Not all the time, but sometimes when we know it's like an advice thing, or when we know this is going to be a slightly complex topic and the member would want to revisit this again, we definitely go through that recording bit.
Yeah, it seems that technology's got a really big role to play in all of this. But, there is also that ongoing onus on making sure that all the advice is really clear and easy to understand, and reinforcing that understanding as much as possible.
I also think it's really good in that scenario of being able to give the client the right information, the amount of information that they personally require to make that informed decision whether to proceed or not proceed. So, you're absolutely right. You can go, if somebody's not sure or they're not asking questions, you can continue to keep going deeper and deeper into the information and providing them with access to the information that they require. Where if somebody knows it and gets it straight away, you can move on. Michelle?
Absolutely. It's the different personality types. Some people, have a lot of foundational understanding and education, and they might need less, whereas some people, want all the detailed charts and reports and analysis, and you need to be able to provide that for them.
Yep. Fantastic. Michelle, Prashant, thank you so much for being part of this particular episode 4. We look forward to catching you in the final episode coming up very shortly. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us again in this episode. I'm looking forward to chatting to you about this actually off the back of our previous conversation around storytelling and telling your client or narrating your client's story or helping them narrate their story. And in this particular episode, we're talking about the demonstration of understanding and how empowering that is for clients to understand how all the different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle fit together as part of their story. Demonstration of understanding can mean a lot of things, from a compliance thing through to, the other end of the spectrum I see is from the client's, emotional state. Tell us a little bit about what it means to you.
Yeah, so quite often the clients will come in and they'll have a hodgepodge of different things all smattered together, and they'll be listening to some their neighbour who's got different things, and they might be working out well for them, and so they generally are a little bit all over the place. And so that's from a financial background. So you could say they'd be financially disorganised, but they're getting by in life. Whatever they earn, they spend, and they do their best for their family. But there's no overarching philosophy there, or there's no coordinating structure. So that's part of it. But what I do like to do is to help them be aware of the pitfalls that lie ahead of them. So these are what I call the unknown unknowns, and so help them prepare in advance. So that's probably something they wouldn't be aware of, and then so to build in that contingencies into their financial plan. Then the next element is to map out a plan for them, which extends. I like to go to 100 and then work back. So then they can actually see their life unfolding over many different years. And then we can then actually plot key milestones and then financial outcomes for all of those. So that's sort of helping them see the picture ahead of them, what lies ahead, and help help them to put in a plan to go on that journey and to complete their story.
Yeah, now this is some really interesting words that you use. The first one I've written down here was disorganized, and obviously the emotion of discomfort that comes with that. So automatically you just know that is there, and you can sort of highlight the fact that you've heard them or listened to them or seen them, with that scenario. And then obviously, you go back and look through the pitfalls, and you can think about what could be a worry in the future, and then. Yeah, planning with them to see the future, and I think that's a pretty powerful thing.
Yes, it is, and I think that's a value add as a financial advisor. Is to I'd like to be a hindsight hero here, so I know that's a bit political, but I do like to look into the future on their behalf and help them be prepared. That's a key part of what I do. It's not historical, reactive, tax-driven strategies, but it's actually looking forward and giving them the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, it's a great term, hindsight hero. Maybe you can coin that one. So tell me what's the difference with that? Like obviously you're focusing on the fact that you're there to help them build their story. In a way, when you start looking at if we go forward to the future and we say, these are all the milestones and the key milestones along the way, you're sort of giving them a sneak peek into the spoiler alert of their own story, if you like. That's we can see the benefits of that. Then tell us then how we go to the actual advice itself and the demonstration of understanding of that advice, as to not just understanding the advice, but understanding how the advice fits into their story.
Yeah, I guess a key part of that is helping them flesh out their goals and what they might like to do in the future. So you do come back to those and remeasure and test those every year. So this is not a financial test. This is more of a how well you're using your money to live your life test. So it's reevaluating those every year, but resetting those long-term plans and reviewing them as they become more closer to reality. So there's two types of assets we're dealing with, and this is throwing back to my accounting days with tangible and intangible assets. So we're working on both as part of their ever-evolving story.
Yep. Now, you mentioned there that part of this is the journey along the way. It's not just about getting to the end of, a milestone and then being in a certain position. It's about enjoying it. Does that mean you're asking them along the way around how happy they are at the moment, and how, that you're asking them about those intangible emotional pieces of their life, not just their throughout the journey, not just at retirement or at a milestone or at a goal end?
100%. Yeah. So I really enjoy that side. So this is way outside of the technical person's comfort zone, and that's where I've come from. So that's what it's all about: is how well are you using your money to enjoy life, and looking at areas where they may not be as happy as they could be. And then what can we do about that? It's up to them, obviously, but I just provide the platform for them to ask those questions and consider.
Yeah. Now, and I get to, as part of this conversation with you, I'm getting to see you visually, albeit we're online, but I can actually see that lights you up inside as a human being, that part of the role, not just about the client being happier.
It does, yeah, because I actually feel like a lot of people do work hard, they do all the right things, and they go to get a good education, then earn a high income, but not necessarily doing what they really want to do, and getting quite a high level of satisfaction from what they're doing. So it's about that side of it. So actually it's about their life, not what someone else thinks they should be doing.
Yes, exactly right. And it's also becoming very clear why you take 5 to 6 meetings to work this through, because obviously there's a lot more to it than just the financial advice piece. Do you see this as a little bit of coaching as well, or is this rather than just advice? Or how do you see yourself as strict? You obviously come from a very technical background, accountant and legal side, and now you're doing financial planning. But do you see yourself as way more than any of those professions?
I see this as, good financial advice. It just happens to it's on the foundation of really what their life goals are, what's really important to them. It's just, I think this is the way it should be done. I certainly don't see myself as anything extraordinary. I certainly don't want to be in the camp of a life coach, but it's financial advice, it's a bit like having your life planned and using your financial strategies to help you achieve that. So they're interconnected, and also on the foundation of your estate plan. So I see this as really good, comprehensive financial advice. Yep,
fantastic. Now, if your clients were at a barbecue describing what you do, how would they describe it?
I think they would probably say I would say Jeff gives financial advice, but he's very strong on estate planning. I'm not sure if they would be able to give me a good barbecue pitch, but I think they would say he's very good. He's very thorough, and he makes sure your estate plan's up to date. So, all you need will go and see him. That's.
I'm not sure what he does, but you need to go see him. It's good.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for opening up and telling us a little bit more about how you work with helping your clients design and live their story. Really appreciate it. I look forward to catching you in the final episode when we catch up shortly.
My pleasure. Thanks, Fraser.